and really focus about travel management. And really that will be interesting to hear his view and thoughts, specifically in this turbulent time. How yeah, startup can navigate and disrupt these businesses, but also as well the future of travel, if you think about it. Over to Saad.
Thank you, Mohammed. Delighted to be here. Can you hear me? Just check in. Can you see the presentation? And
very well, very well.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. So thank you, Mohammed, again. Delighted to be here. My name is Saad Berrada. I'm co-founder and CEO of Fairjungle. Fairjungle is a next generation business travel management platform for modern companies. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, startup in business travel, you're in trouble. Not the right timing, not the right crisis. Poor startup guys. What I want to share with you is and you've probably seen this everywhere in the world. They've been talking about this, and it's kind of an ironic, but at the same time, there's a silver lining. This is what you can see here is the Chinese word for crisis. And when you look at it, it's actually composed of two words. The first word means risk. The second word means opportunity. So Chinese has actually linked crisis and opportunity. And the objective of this whole presentation is to tell you, even when everything looks bleak, in an industry that has been hit with a 70% downturn in a couple of months, how do you find silver lining? How do you find a niche opportunity? And how do you find growth in a depressed market? What I will start doing is I will start off by explaining the overall landscape of business travel and how it has evolved in the last 20 years. Then afterwards, I'll explain how COVID impacted the industry, showcasing the short-term and long-term effects. And finally, I'll explain how Fairjungle adapted to the current circumstances and found silver lining in a distressed industry. So let me give you very quickly an overview of the business travel industry. So maybe some of you are familiar with that, but there's something very shocking about business travel. It's something that everybody's doing, but it is actually a $1.5 trillion industry worldwide. 1.5 trillion industry, just to compare it, it's almost the size of the GDP of France, and it's 1%, it's more than 1% of the global GDP. So it's a huge market. I want to share with you three important figures. 70% of people who travel are actually small and medium businesses. When you think about business travel, you're thinking about large companies that are actually traveling, but most of business travel is done by SMEs. The second thing is 2 out of 3 SMEs are actually unmanaged. What do we mean by unmanaged? It means that everybody in these companies are actually free to book their travel with their own provider. There's no control, there's no reporting, there's no visibility, there's no insurance safety of the travelers. One shocking stat is when you look at the companies that actually have chosen to go through a travel management company or a travel agency, there's actually 44% of leakage in these companies. What's the definition of leakage? It's actually people who are supposed to book through their travel management platform or their travel agency and who go outside the system, so don't respect the travel policy of the company because they find that the travel management company is not catering to their needs, because it's not slick enough, it's not easy to use enough, it doesn't have the right data or right inventory. So what we're talking about is actually one of the biggest markets, one of the biggest industries that has been stuck in the 90s, that hasn't been disrupted with digital, where people who are equipped actually leak to leisure platforms, and a lot of people are not equipped. So this is a challenge that we came up with in Fairjungle. We saw this huge opportunity and we said, what is business travel going to look like 10 years down the line? And COVID is actually affecting this industry in a way that it is accelerating the trends that we have seen in the last couple of years. And this is what I'm going to showcase. Let me give you very quickly an overview of the business travel industry. I'm going to focus on a specific vertical, is business travel agencies or business travel distributors. So basically, just to present the landscape, on one side you have the providers. It's British Airways, Air France, rail companies, hotels. On the other side, you have clients. So these are the businesses and the travelers. In the middle, there's an intermediary, which is a travel management company or a travel agency. And what happened is we tried to map the different actors in this landscape, and we're not a lot of actors because it's a complicated industry, over two axes. The first one is cost efficiency, and you can see expensive platforms and cost-efficient platforms. And the second one is traveler experience, the ones that are stuck in the 1984 UX and the ones that actually bring value to the end user. And you can see three clusters, and actually these three clusters represent the evolution over time of business travel management platforms. So in the early 80s or 90s, you had let's say traditional travel agencies. The major ones are American Express, Carlson Wagonlit, BCD Travel. And these companies are basically a lot of physical agents that do the booking on behalf of the travelers. So it's actually, I'm guessing for all the people that were born before the 80s are more familiar with that. We used to book leisure travel, go into a brick and mortar agency or call an agent and asking him for a quotation and confirming the booking. The agent would go on a platform, which is Amadeus or Sabre, do his coding, and 30 minutes later, you get your booking. So a lot of agencies actually today in 2020 still work like that. You send an email, call an agent, ask him for a quotation, and then there's a booking. In the early 2000s, we started to have the first digital disruption where these traditional agencies made partnerships with external editors that built a software, what we call online booking tools, that allow you to do what you are able to do on Skyscanner or Kayak today. It's basically an online platform that does the booking for you. So we're starting to have the beginning of the digital revolution, where instead of calling an agent or email an agent, we're doing it by ourselves autonomously on a platform. The limit to that is that these agencies, what they did is they basically outsourced the development of their digital strategy and just took an off-the-shelf platform to do the online booking. The last revolution actually came in 5 years ago, where people understood that today, to take the digital journey, the tech platform should be in the center of the value prop. In 2020, it is really adamant, it's important that tech and data is in the center of travel management, and therefore tech players and not traditional agencies were the ones who developed their own solution instead of actually just taking a solution off the shelf, and put the online platform, management platform, at the center of the value prop. Three of those companies, so Fairjungle is one of those players. Two of those companies, maybe you've already heard of, are TripActions and Travelberg. Let me give you a quick overview of what happened in the last 5 years, just pre-COVID. So as I said before, new age for business travel management platform, tech solution in the center of their value prop, and basically displacing and taking market shares from traditional players. These are the trajectories of Travelperk and TripActions. In the space of 4 years, TripActions was able to generate more than €1 billion of travel volume going through the platform for a total valuation of 4 billion. And Travelperk was able to do the same thing in Europe with more than 300 million euros of valuation. As you can see, Fairjungle is a younger platform, but trailing behind the two leaders on the market. TripActions is one of the fastest growing companies in the US. Travelperk is actually the fastest SaaS platform in Europe. So huge industry, not disrupted with digital, two players coming into the market and growing tremendously right before COVID. And then came COVID-19. So I believe in all the scenarios that we have been building and all the risk mitigation analysis that we could do, nobody predicted that the travel industry would be affected this hard by something so dramatic. even in the case of a terrorist attack or a global economy crisis, the predictions are less aggressive than what actually happened. Why is that? It's because it's not an economic shock by itself. It's not only a sanitary shock. It's actually a shock on different levels. What happened is from one day to another, somewhere in March and April, depending on the countries and where you stand in the globe, people started asking themselves questions that either they clearly didn't ask themselves before, or they asked themselves and they didn't want to answer. The first thing is a health shock. Where are my, from one day to another, everybody was asking themselves, where are my travelers? Can I travel there? Is it restricted? Is it safe to travel there? The second shock was an economic shock, obviously. We were entering, and we are actually in the midst of a global economic crisis. And all the CFOs of the world, what they're asking themselves is, how can I decrease my budget without jeopardizing growth? Is business travel even necessary today? And overall, probably the most interesting one is the value shock. Is people are challenging the paradigm of business travel and thinking, is this the opportunity to change the way we travel? Is there everything that we talked about in the last 10 years around sustainable travel that was basically a soft access for way too long is now at the center of the reflection of the new travel policies? Is there a responsible way to travel once COVID is behind us? What I want to share with you now is basically what we did is we spent 3 months talking to clients, talking to prospects, and talking to travelers and business travel experts, and trying to understand how is the needle going to move on the short term and the long term on the business travel landscape. And basically we mapped what we call demand shocks and supply shocks. Demand shocks is, how is the end user, how is the traveler, how is the CFO going to rethink travel, and how is it going to affect how people are traveling? And the supply shock is how actors like us, providers of business travel solutions, will be affected by the pandemic. On the demand shock, the first effect was obviously regionalization. Borders were restricted. Let's take the European example. You could not travel internationally for a long time unless there were specific indications. I'll share with you a simple statistic. If you look at business travel landscape in Europe, there was a factor of 1 to 3 between air travel and train travel. So basically, you travel 3 times more using an airline company than a rail company. The factor has actually completely reversed. Now it's 1 out of 3 flights so 1 flight for 3 trains. This is an interesting movement towards a new way of travel pushed by regionalization of travel. The second one is surge of managed travel. So basically, and I'm going to go into more details afterwards, is we moved from a completely open system. Remember, I said that 2 out of 3 SMEs are actually unmanaged. Now people are asking themselves, where are my travelers? Am I allowing them to travel? Is this travel even necessary? And this introduced the idea of introducing travel management companies into even smaller companies. Focus on employee safety. Obviously, when you look at the health crisis, one of the most important questions that people ask themselves is, where are my travelers right now? Have they been exposed? Are they in a country where I can repatriate them? These were the immediate health related questions that people ask themselves. And that will be probably lasting for the next couple of months, if not the next couple of years. Shift towards sustainable travel. I'll go into more details later, but one interesting that came out from discussion with our clients is everybody talked about sustainable travel, but more in a, let's say the word very bluntly, a greenwashing way where they had to respond to the criteria, but didn't really think about it. What we are noticing more and more is that people are considering new ways of travel. People are considering introducing sustainability as a core access into their travel policy, and not just as a reporting access to show that they're reporting on their carbon compensation, for instance. And of course, train over plane. Rail is becoming rail and mobile are becoming necessary for travel within Europe. I'm focusing on the European landscape, and train companies will have a major role for the next coming years, while we expect the airline industry to suffer way more. From a supply shock, of course, when you have such a major crisis and some major impact, you can imagine that all the traditional travel agencies that were dependent on manual work of agents, well, they were completely lost because they had no revenue, a lot of incoming calls from angry clients, but no way to cater to their needs. So what people are thinking today is, how can I move to a solution where I can push our travelers to be autonomous, where I can get all the level of control that I need without being dependent on an external physical manual agent. There's also, of course, two additional effects from economic standpoints. The supplier commission, so the commissions that you used to have from the different airline companies or rails will be shrinking, and there will be a global competition cleansing. This is what we have seen in all the industries that have been distressed in such a dramatic way. A lot of companies will actually disappear, unfortunately, and some of them will regroup, and you'll have the emergence of small digital agile players. Think about 2008, maybe you're familiar with this, but Airbnb actually was founded in 2008 in the latest, most dramatic shock for the travel industry, right after the economic crisis. And they were growing, I believe, more than 5 to 7 times each year. So every time you think about the travel industry and you think about and silver lining in a depressed market, think about Airbnb and how they managed to take an opportunity to reinvent a model in a depressed market. So I'm going to focus now on the short-term effects of the COVID on the business travel industry. The first idea is that we'll probably travel a lot less and very differently for the next couple of months, if not the next couple of years. The first thing that we have noticed is 60 to 70% in decrease in volumes, explained by mainly two factors: an economic pressure on the operational and financial performance. So obviously companies needed to review their budgets. Maybe some of you know that business travel is actually the third expense right after COGS and salaries in most companies. So it's a major expense that people very rarely look upon, and it's one of the first that get cut in this kind of crisis. And of course, there's public health instability and increased regulatory volatility. When you don't know where you can travel, where you don't know if you can come back from the destination where you go, obviously, you're gonna only travel when it's absolutely essential. The second effect that we notice is that there's an increasing share of shorter journeys. What we have seen since COVID is actually an acceleration of government reforms for economic recovery with their home country as a core priority. So we're coming back to protectionism. We're coming back to some of the trends that we have seen in the last years. And everybody's revisiting their supply chain platforms in a more regional way to be more resilient in these kind of crises. When international travel becomes complicated, what you do is the first thing, you revisit your supply chain and rethink your footprint in a more regional way. Let's look at long term. Here you can see a graph that shows you the difference between global GDP recovery and travel spend recovery for the last crisis. To be totally transparent, I don't believe that the current crisis is going to be a V-shaped recovery trajectory. I think it's going to be longer than that. But more importantly, after 2008, travel resumed very quickly, and travel resumed with the same paradigm. There was no paradigm shift. There was no revolution. It was exactly the same way. Basically accelerated growth, same kind of actors, same kind of experience. I believe things will be differently in this time. Being a French company, we need to share a quote from our president for legal obligations. Obviously, we have historic opportunity to rebuild our economy and our society on new foundations, to reinvent ourselves and to invest in a low carbon future. It's really interesting because this is a generic quotation from the French president. But the interesting thing is all these key features in this quotation are relevant to business travel. We need to rethink on new foundations. So it's not evolution, it's not addition, it's actually rebuilding with new foundations, reinventing ourselves, thinking about new models and low carbon future at the center of the strategy. So even in the business travel industry, which is, let's say it very bluntly, is one of the most polluting industries in the world, how can we introduce carbon and sustainability and eco-responsibility in the center of strategy? So what we mean by that is, and our general feeling in Fairjungle, and I believe a lot of the experts in the industry agree with that, is there are two ways, two paths for companies in the business travel landscape: either accelerated transformation or death. What does that mean? What we expect, as I said before, is an increasing penetration of travel management companies. People will not be allowed to travel without any sort of control, without any sort of reporting, without any sort of safety, without any sort of eco-responsibility. So there's going to be an acceleration towards sourcing solutions that will help companies build their travel policy in a sustainable, cost-efficient, and safe way. The second thing is there's going to be an increased sensitivity to price and carbon footprint. As I said before, carbon footprint has been a soft axis so far. Price sensitivity was only for companies that did a lot of optimization. Today, you need to build a travel program that is efficient from a cost perspective, but also from a carbon footprint perspective. Sometimes these two are actually can be contradictory. It happens, fortunately, that in business travel, eco-responsibility and global cost efficiency can be consistent. The last effect that we expect is we're going to move, thanks to data, thanks to the complexity of the new business travel landscape and travel landscape overall, we're going to move to tech managed solutions. When you need to handle so much data about the regulatory evolutions for more than 200 countries and all the different combinations that you can imagine, all the evolutions for airline, rail, hotel companies, rental car companies, policies all over the world, when you need to compare different modes of transports, eco-responsibility, cost efficiency, how do you combine that without having a tech managed solution? It becomes completely impossible for traditional agencies that do manual work to do this kind of computation to be catered with the complexity of the world that we're handling right now when it comes to business travel. Being an ex-consultant, I'll share an interesting quote from a report that that was produced by McKinsey a couple of months ago. Let me share that with you. The moments that matter might mean more digital than ever, and in new places within the customer journey. Solutions and policies that provide choice and control will help to build the trust and confidence necessary to get the travelers back on the road and in the air. The report was called "Make It Better, Not Just Safer." It's really important because what I'm getting from this is everybody focused on getting travelers again just by building confidence again, that we're just gonna tick the safety box and it's gonna be okay. We're just gonna reassure them and tell them this country is okay and it's gonna be okay. But when something so dramatic happens, it is the unique opportunity to rethink the whole model in a way that answers to the new paradigm and to the new constraints. It's not only about safety. Safety is one of the dimensions that should be considered, but it's also the opportunity to reinvent a system that has been stagnating for the last 20 years. And this is exactly what we've been working on for the last couple of months. So the first thing we started off to cross the chasm is, how do we rethink travel policies? So let me explain where we come from. Travel policies today This is basically, and I believe for everybody who has already traveled, it's you're allowed economy class, and you can take business travel if you take more than 10 hours flights. And for trains, you take first class or second class. And if you can book in advance, that would be cool. This is travel policies for the last 20 years. With everything that is happening, we need to completely rethink how people enforce travel policies and how companies rethink the way they want to manage their travel. The first thing is, given the health constraints, you need to be able to have dynamic country restrictions. You need to have live data on all the regulations and restrictions all over the world and update travel policies in a dynamic way so you can monitor the safety and security of all your travelers. A second innovation that we've been pushing is everybody was asking themselves the question, is business travel even necessary? We've been using Zoom and Teams for the last couple of months, and it's been okay. People started complaining and saying, okay, it's not the same thing than live discussions. It's really cool to meet clients, and we kind of miss, the live feeling. And I believe that's okay. But I also believe that a lot of the travel that we've been doing so far was not justified. Same day trips, flight trips to go to short-term destinations. A lot of what we have been doing has not been done in the right way. So one of the modules that we've been introducing artificial intelligence in is how to be able to identify which trip is essential and which trip is not. And this is how we've been moving the needle from traditional travel agencies, which business is basically just a ticketing booth to sell tickets, into a solution that is going to help companies better manage their travel, better reduce their travel costs, and introduce new criteria in the way they manage their travel. And one of the things, it sounds ludicrous to have a travel agency tell you which not to travel with them. And this is what travel solutions, modern travel solutions should be doing. It's actually telling clients that this trip should not be booked with us. It's actually not essential. You should be considering another opportunity. Third innovation brought by Fairjungle. So I want to say brought by Fairjungle, but I'm going to be transparent. It's actually Google who started this 10 years ago. They did something really smart and reinvented policies. The travel industry has been marked by yield management, where prices are completely dynamic and can vary in a matter of minutes. However, travel policies have not moved. They have been static for the last 20 years, and it's basically dependent on the class of travel. What Google did very smartly, and that we mimicked in our platform, is actually, instead of being with static policies based on static criteria, you should be thinking about your policies that adapt to real-time market prices and real-time market availabilities. So you need to build an engine that tells you, instead of when you need to go to New York, well, you allow premium eco, it needs to tell you, okay, the right pricing for this travel is 1,200 euros. And you are responsible for that budget, and you're within policy as long as you're below the budget. So this live pricing algorithm in the yield management industry is completely important to reduce and control business travel costs. And this is one of the axes that we have implemented. And the last one is green policies. This is really important. And we've asked ourselves, how can you build a policy that is green? And we looked at what our competitors did so far. Everybody did two simple things. First thing is reporting on carbon. So basically saying, this is how much you consumed, and introducing travel compensation plans. So nothing about reduction of carbon footprint. It's only about, telling you how much you've been bad and giving you ways to make amends. What we try to do at Fairjungle is ask ourselves, can we be not only part of the solution, but actually tackle the original problem? How can we push people to select the best way to travel? How can we introduce carbon footprint in the center of a policy? So the first thing that we did is we actually completely changed the way you book travel. And we don't let travelers choose the way of transportation in Fairjungle. We don't tell them, so if you want to travel, let's say you go to Marseille from Paris. If you go on any travel agency or any platform in the world today, you're just going to say, I need a flight to go to Marseille, and they're going to give you the flights to Marseille, and you can book a flight to Marseille. With Fairjungle, what you say is you say where you need to go, a specific address, and it will compute from your original address to your destination address, what's the best way to travel from an eco responsibility standpoint, from a budget standpoint, from a productivity standpoint. So even in the choice of the traveler, the motor, the engine of Fairjungle intervenes to actually push the right recommendations with the right criteria, taking eco-responsibility in the center of the way we push people and we recommend how people travel. The second thing that we have been focusing on is, so far, all the travel agencies have been all about the booking service. Basically, as I say, it's a ticketing service. It's just, I'll send you your e-ticket, your flight or rail or your hotel voucher. But in a way where, in a world where everything is dynamic, where the booking is just the start of a journey, we need to move from a booking service to a travel companion. We need to be able to show the flexibility and agility that travel with all the things that are happening right now, and give autonomy to the traveler to be very flexible and very reactive to everything that is happening. If there's a new crisis in a country or a new regulation, he needs to be able to modify and cancel his ticket. If he's blocked in a destination, he needs to be able to contact an agent directly from his application. If there's a movement in his agenda, he needs to synchronize automatically. So we're moving from booking platform, and they call themselves online booking tools, into what we call a smart travel companion that goes beyond just a booking platform and actually goes through the whole journey of travel and gives autonomy to the traveler. The last thing, and I'm going to finish on that. Our core idea here is, in the business travel landscape, you can't be one to win. What you need to have is an open ecosystem powered by data, so you can combine all the different criteria that you need to have a right travel management program. Let me explain. Today, in travel, you need to consider budgets, you need to consider travel security, you need to consider eco footprint, you need to consider payment, into collaboration between travelers. You need to consider if there's an alternative way to travel or an alternative way to avoid this travel. So what we're building today is to say, instead of being the one-stop shop, we're building an ecosystem where any relevant player from the system can plug into our platform and add the additional feature that we're not catering to today. So this is basically Fairjungle. This is our view on how COVID impacted our industry, and this is how we're finding silver lining in an industry that has been depressed for the last couple of months. I'm gonna stop there. Thank you very much for your attention, and maybe there are some questions that we could answer.
Thank you, Saad, for that excellent presentation. For the Q&A, if you could kindly close your screen.
Yes.
So we have some of our first questions have already come in. The first one is from Steve. So what are the key digital technologies that you see as helping with the transformation in the travel business? Does AI play a role? And in which specific roles? For example, maybe NLP for request interpretation, rule-based for policy enforcement, and machine learning.
This is a super interesting question, and what I want to answer is, I want to differentiate between two types of AI. So a lot of people put AI, a lot of things into AI and define a different way. Just from my background, I'm an applied mathematics engineer. So I'm going to try to be as rigorous as possible. What I define as AI is the complex version of AI, where there's learning that is beyond what is put into algorithms. I think the travel industry is at that level where we need to move to a more, let's say, algorithmic work that does optimization, like basic optimization on the existing. I think the second level of evolution is going to be AI. So what we have started, so we're moving from manual work. The first revolution that we're bringing in with the other players on the market is actually just pushing it to digital, introducing algorithms to do optimization. Let me give you an example. It's just basic algorithms that are able to compute more than 450 different airlines, 250 rail companies, compute their different, carbon footprints, budgets, productivity, durations, and just give you the best solution. Probably a lot of people would market this as AI. I would call this just like smart algorithms. AI is the next level. I don't think we're there yet, but I definitely think that it will be the next revolution for business travel. It's actually anticipating the needs of travelers. The way we think about it, and this is one of the axes of our R&D team, is how can we, based on, let's say, calendars of our travelers, anticipate how, when they're going to travel, and can we pre-book their travel just based on their calendar? This is what happens today. What you do is you have a meeting in 3 months, you have it in your calendar, and then a week from your travel, you go like, okay, I just remember I need to go to Stockholm, and I do my booking. If you're directly integrated to your calendar, a smart, let's say, algorithm can actually anticipate that travel and do a push to you. You can go even beyond that and actually say, you're trying to book today, and given our algorithm, we expect the price of this ticket to actually decrease in the next 2 days. So what we'll do is we'll store your booking and do the booking in 2 days for you. So just maybe to summarize the answer, I believe we're in this is a huge industry, but that is still stuck in the 90s. We're bringing a revolution, just pushing digital, pushing smart algorithms. The next wave will be introducing AI.
Thank you for that. Our next question is from Mohammed Zaki, so from CSA. How can Fairjungle convince these ecosystem players mentioned to work with your company?
It's a very good question. This is, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem when you're at this stage. When you're a young startup, you're 15 people in Paris and mainly engineers. What you do is you're super ambitious and you say, okay, I want to develop a partnership with Revolut. I need Revolut to have my full value prop, but unless you're a big player, you cannot get the partnership with Revolut. So it's actually, the way we do it is, and to be fully transparent, is we sell a vision. If you get stuck today and you say, I need to reach this level of ambition or this level of, let's say, revenue before I start talking to the big players, you're not going to get there. What you need to know is you need to have a clear vision on where you need to head. You need to talk to enough partners and then identify those that connect with your vision. This is how we have been doing so far, rather successfully. This is how we built more than 15 partnerships in our solution, just selling people on our vision, selling people on our team and our capabilities. And when you're with self-minded people that have the same vision, it actually works out really well.
Okay, excellent. And just one final question coming from Wilhelm, pretty straightforward. Can you describe more about your business model?
Sure. So our business model is a SaaS business model. So it's per active user per month. And this is completely different to what has been worked so far. So traditional agencies, what they do is that they're gonna get most of their revenue as commissions from the airline providers and rail providers. So basically, there's a contradiction between their own interests, where they want to sell you the maximum, level of tickets, and what they're trying to sell to their clients, where they're telling them we're going to control and reduce your costs. In our model, we're marketing ourselves as a tech solution. We're not selling you an agency. We're not selling you a call center that is handling your requests. We're selling you a technology. And just to be consistent with our value prop, we copied the modern model. So it's per active user per month.
Thank you so much. I think that is all that we've got left for questions. Again, we thank you for your insightful presentation. And for any other questions, we'll be holding on to those for the end.